Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shankarupena Machyattam Pankikritamabhudhyaya Kinkari Yasya Samaya Shankaracharya Mashraye Prahladavarago Devo Yodrisimha Paro Harihi Nrisimhopasakam Nityam Tam Nrisimha Gurum Bhaje Sri Satchidananda Shivabhinavya Nrisimha Bharatya Bidhan Yatindran Vidyanidhin Mantranidhin Sadatmanishtan Bhaje Manava Shambhurupan Sadatmadhyana Niratam Vishayebhyah Parang Mukham Naumi Shastreshu Nishnatam Chandrashekhara Bharatim Vivekinam Mahapragyam Dhairyodarya Kshamanidhim Sadabhinavakurbantam Vidyatirtha Bhaje Ajnanam Jannavitirtham Vidyatirtham Vivekinam Sarvesham Sukhadam Tirtham Bharati Tirthamashraye Vidya Vinaya Sampannam Vitaragam Vivekinam Vande Vedanta Tattvajam Vidushekara Bharatim Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Medeva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Om Namaste. I want to start a small series of talks on the Vivekachudamani by Adi Shankara Bhagavatpada based on the Vyakhya, the commentary by the 34th Acharya of the Sringeri Sharada Peetham, Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswaminah. The Vivekachudamani is an introductory Prakarana Grantha composed by Adi Shankara Bhagavatpada, who also wrote the Bhashyas or the commentaries on the Prasthanatrayam, which essentially consist of three central works of the Vedanta canon: the Shruti Prasthana, consisting of the Upanishads, the Smriti Prasthana, which is the Bhagavad Gita, and the Nyaya Prasthana, which is the Brahma Sutra. Now, because Shankaracharya composed the Bhashyas to the Prasthanatraya, he is referred to as the Bhashyakara. Apart from the Bhashyas on the Prasthanatrayam, Adi Shankara also wrote several independent works in prose and in verse called Prakarana Granthas. They are independent in the sense that they are not commentaries of other works, rather, they are authored by Shankaracharya independently. But the subject matter in them is Advaita. The source material is the Shruti, but the presentation is Shankaracharya's. These Prakarana Granthas can vary in size and in scope. Some of them are very small, like the Ekashloki, which is just one verse in length, but is quite deep in its meaning. Others, like the Upadesha Sahasri, can be quite long. The Upadesha Sahasri, for example, is 1000 verses in length. The Vivekachudamani is 581 verses long. Its speciality is that it is written in relatively simple Sanskrit, but in both its import and its scope, it is quite a comprehensive text of Advaita and consequently quite popular with students. The 34th Acharya of the Sringeri Sharada Peetham, Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal, wrote a commentary on the Vivekachudamani. The beauty of this commentary is that it reveals the true depth and the profundity of the original verses by Adi Shankara Bhagavatpada. In the Jagadguru himself, we have an example of someone who has attained the highest goal of human pursuit. In him, we have the true example of a Jivan Mukta in recent living memory. For such an eminent personality to have blessed us with this commentary is a treasure and a blessing, and therefore we will use that as the basis for these sessions. An interesting anecdote to start with. Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Swamigal commented on the first 515 verses of the Vivekachudamani, which, as I said previously, has 581 verses in total. Some devotees wanted to see all the verses commented and made a representation to the Acharya's Shishya, who is the Jeshta Mahasannidhanam, Jagadguru Abhinava Vidyatirtha Mahaswamigal, to approach his Guru and make a request to complete the work. When Jeshta Mahasannidhanam approached his Guru, the Guru is supposed to have said, Vaktavya Atraiva Sangrahitaha Nididhyasanam antara nadhunanyatra chittam vyapranoti. That is, whatever that can be said has already been said here in the Vyakhya. The mind refuses to entertain any other thought apart from Nididhyasanam, which is abiding in the bliss that is the self. From these words, one can infer the exalted state that the Jagadguru was occupying, that such an extraordinary spiritual genius has deigned to bless us with this commentary is something for which all of us should be eternally grateful. With that introduction, we will commence the first shloka of the Vivekachudamani, which is a Mangalacharanam or an invocatory verse made by Adi Shankara Bhagavatpada and addressed to his Guru. Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Parabanandam Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. Acharya Shankara Bhagavatpada offers his namaskaras to his Guru, Govinda Bhagavatpada. He says, I offer my namaskara to my Sadguru Govinda. And in using the term Govinda, Shankaracharya wishes to include both his Guru, Govinda Bhagavatpada, and the Lord, one of whose names is Govinda. With that one word, he has referred to both. He goes on to describe the nature of his Guru with the adjective Paramanandam. Govindam Paramanandam, he says. Essentially, he's saying, my Guru, who is of the nature of Paramanandam or supreme bliss. And in doing so, Shankaracharya has essentially equated the Guru with the Ishvara and with the Atma. Because in the Upanishads, the Atma or the Self has been described as Ananda. From this verse, one is reminded of the famous shloka on Dakshinamurti, the Adi Guru. Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyaptadehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. There too, the Ishvara, Guru, and the Self have been described as identical. So Shankaracharya says, my Guru, whose nature is of supreme bliss, is the reality that is Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam. That is, he is that reality which has been pointed to by all the Upanishads. But he also goes on to say that that reality is Tamagocharam. It is beyond the scope of the words. Now, it may appear that it is slightly contradictory that something which is the subject matter of the Vedas, the Upanishads, which are ultimately words, Shabda Pramana or verbal testimony, can at the same time be beyond the scope of words. A doubt may arise. In answer to that, we should understand that the reality that is being described in the Upanishads is not being directly described, it is being described by implication. So, in several places, for example, Brahman or the self is described in negative terms by saying what it is not. Neti neti, ashabdam, asvarsham, arupam, etc. Alternatively, when it does describe Brahma directly, like in Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma of the Taittiriya Upanishad, it does so by pointing out the nature of Brahman by implication. The direct reference to Brahman by words is not possible. The reason for that is that Brahman cannot be objectified by anything because it is the subject of everything. So it cannot be pointed to as this and spoken of. The Upanishads themselves say, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. It is that which is beyond the scope of words and the mind. Despite Brahman being the object of the Upanishads, it is not directly referred to or referable by anything, by any pramana. So essentially what Shankaracharya has said in the Mangalacharanam is paying namaskaras to his Guru, who's none other than Ishvara, and says that he is the reality that has been pointed to by the Upanishads but is beyond the scope of words. With that, we will move over to the second verse, which goes as follows. Jantunam narajanma durlabham atah pumstvam tato viprata tasmad vaidika dharma marga parata vidvatvam asmat param आत्मानात्म विवेचनम स्वानुभवो ब्रह्मात्मना संस्थितिः मुक्तिर्नो शतकोटि जन्मसु कृतैः पुण्यैर्विना लभ्यते. In the second verse, Shankaracharya is saying that amongst the entire collection of species, the different kinds of births and the different kinds of bodies that one can take, achieving a human birth is an extremely rare thing and therefore it must be prized. And the reason why he says that is because amongst all the species possible, it is humanity whose actions have consequences. In the Shastras, it is the earth which is the karma bhumi, the place where actions can be performed in consonance with the Shastras, which lead to future punya and papa. Now, other species such as animals and plants don't have the free will with which to act, and therefore any actions taken by animals out of instinct, out of natural behavior, will not lead to the accrual of punya or papa. So, for example, if a lion or a tiger is violent and kills other animals for food, that in itself is not committing a sin or a papa, because the animal is only behaving in a manner which is natural to it. Whereas humanity has the intelligence and the free will to determine a course of action. And therefore, actions that are in consonant with the a consonance with the Shastras lead to the accrual of punya, and actions that violate the Shastras lead to the accrual of papa. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the Devas and the Gandharvas, etc., who are the celestial beings who have the intelligence and free will, but they do not have adhikara or the right to perform actions. And therefore, a human birth is highly prized because that brings with it the possibility of taking actions that ultimately lead to the betterment of the jiva. And therefore, Shankaracharya says, Jantu nam narajanma durlabham. And by Jantu here, he means everything which takes birth. He then goes on to say, Ataf pumstvam. And by pumstvam, by upalakshana, by implication, he is referring to all those people that have the right or the adhikara for Veda Adhyayana or the study of scriptures. And Shankaracharya says those that have the adhikara to study the scriptures are at an advantage because such an adhikara gives the possibility of them learning those actions that would lead to their betterment and avoiding those actions which are likely to cause them harm. And therefore, a human birth in which one has the right to study scriptures is certainly to be praised. And by pumstvam, the technical meaning is males, but the implied meaning or the true import of that is those people that have the right to study the scriptures. But even among those that have the right to study scriptures, Shankaracharya says, Tato Viprata, that is, the Brahmanas are at an intrinsic advantage to the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas. The reason for which is that the Varnashrama Vyavastha that was put in place was that unlike the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas, who have other worldly duties, important duties necessary for the proper functioning of society, such as the protection of society and the economic well-being through trade and commerce performed by the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas respectively, unlike those two groups, the Brahmana Varna has been enjoined by the scriptures to solely focus on the study of scriptures and to educate the next generation, to pass that scriptural knowledge. That is all that they were required to do. to focus entirely on the educational and spiritual upliftment of themselves and the rest of society, for which society was instructed by the scriptures to protect the Brahmanas and to provide for their needs. And that may no longer be the case today, but the original intent of the Varnashrama Vyavastha was certainly that. Now, unlike the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas who have worldly duties, they may have the right to Shastra Adhyana, but they have other distractions. The Brahmanas do not have other distractions and can solely dedicate themselves to the study of scriptures, and therefore they are at an advantage compared to other groups of people. But Shankaracharya points out something quite important. He says, merely having the right to solely focus on scriptural study is not sufficient. One ought to carry oneself in a manner that is conducive to that path. And therefore, those that follow the instructions of the Veda and conduct their activities in consonance with the Vedas are at an advantage. And so he says, Tasmat Vaidika Dharma Marga Parata. Those who have tailored their lives to act in accordance with scriptural injunctions are at an advantage compared to those that are merely Brahmanas by birth. However, mere rote performance of religious activities is also insufficient. One needs to understand the implication of scriptures and what it is trying to tell us to do, and which requires a proper study of the scriptures. And therefore, Shankaracharya says, even amongst those that perform religious activities, those that are the Vidvans, those that have studied the scriptures are at an advantage because they understand the true import of what scriptures are trying to tell us. They have the bird's eye view of where scriptures are pointing us towards, and therefore they are at a natural advantage. And so he says, Vidvatvam asmat param. The scholar is favorably positioned amongst those brahmanas that lead a religious life, because the deep study of the scriptures allows them to have better clarity on the nature of dharma and how they should conduct themselves to best achieve that. At some point, everyone comes to the realization that there is a greater aim than dharma, that there is a higher calling, and that liberation or moksha from the never ending cycle of births and deaths is what people should be striving towards. And that naturally leads them to find out the nature of reality. And so Shankaracharya says, superior to those that are well versed in the scriptures are those that have the capacity to discern between the real and the unreal. So he uses the words Atma Anatma Vivechanam, the ability to distinguish between the self and the non self. And that quality, that characteristic, is called Viveka, the Viveka and the Vivekachudamani, which essentially means discrimination or the capacity to distinguish between one thing and the other, which is quite important because that Viveka is a crucial skill that one needs to possess in order to distinguish what is the self from the non self. And so Shankaracharya says, Atma Anatma Vivechanam places one at an advantage over those individuals that have Vidvatvam, mere scholarship. But ultimately, even that Viveka has to culminate in the knowledge of the self, because it is the knowledge of the self that leads to moksha or liberation. And therefore, he says Svanubhavaha. And by Svanubhavaha, he is talking about the fructification of that knowledge into personal experience, which ultimately, on a long standing and a deep abidance in that experience, leads to what is known as Brahmatmana Samsthitihi, the abidance in the knowledge of the identity of the self with Brahman. And those rare few who have achieved this Brahmatmana samsthitihi are those that are called the Jivan Mukta. In, in describing the various steps towards the Jivan Mukti, Shankaracharya in one verse has essentially provided pretty much the entire foundational core of Advaita Vedanta. He starts off by talking about, or rather hinting about, who has the right to face the consequences of their actions. He goes on to talk about who has the right to scriptural studies and performance of the actions entailed in those scriptures. He points the way to karma yoga, the performance of those rituals in a disinterested fashion, which leads to the purity of the mind and the intellect, and ultimately creates the conditions for the entry into Vedanta. He points to the achievement of liberation through knowledge and experience. He talks about the highest state of abidance in that knowledge. And therefore, he says, in order to pass through each of those steps requires an extraordinarily refined intellect, which is only possible through hundreds and crores of births, is what Shankaracharya says. Muktirno shatakoti janma sukritaiv punyair vina labhyate. Liberation cannot be achieved without the punya that has been accrued through hundreds of crores of lives. With that, we will take a brief pause, and in the next session, we will look at the commentary to this very important verse by Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswaminah, who essentially says that this verse contains within it the essence of the entirety of the Vivekachudamani. The reasons behind why he says that we will look at in the next class. Namaste. Hari Om. Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.